Hey, Joseph, how you doing?
Hey,
Good. How are you guys doing?
Really well.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on your program.
Yeah. We're
Absolutely.
excited to have you. All right. So we like to start off with by you giving a background because you have more nuances if we can pull stuff up from the internet, but we'd rather hear it from you, especially from our audience. So just give us a brief history of how you got to where you are, and then we'll start asking questions from there.
Perfect.
How I got where I am. That's an interesting question.
At the
Yep,
quantum
There's
mechanics.
a whole lifetime of an answer there.
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, where do you think I am?
Well, that's kind of the fun part, right?
Well, yeah, you're connecting the mysterious of the physical world into this quantum field. I think, like you're making this physical world come back into who we are as a projector, and you're showing the science behind it, which when I study your stuff, you're actually giving more scientific study than maybe years ago with theologians. It was seemingly theoretically, unless you experienced it. You're actually allowing people to get to a place where they can allow themselves to go into the experience easier because of your background in science. And
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
So, how did I get there?
yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah. So, I grew up in a family that was very science oriented. I have an engineer brother. I have doctors and attorneys in the background of my family. And as I like to joke, dinner table conversations in my home required references.
Right.
So you couldn't just toss something in and expect the rest of the family just to accept it. And so that really, as you would guess, pushed me in a direction of um, a science future. I didn't know what that science future might be, but I was strong in math, I was strong in science, and I ended up at the University of Colorado in Boulder
Mhm.
and began a typical basic science set of classes, physics, calculus, uh, biology, microbiology. And I was rolling along with that, thinking that somewhere in the future that would all come together into some kind of career. But simultaneously, in my social life, I had begun to have, as a lot of kids did in my generation, probably still do, experimented with marijuana and particularly with hallucinogenic drugs.
Yep.
And I took a lot of adventurous trips, but I had one in particular that was very, very transformative. And I'd had hints of it in other experiences, and I had already started reading about kind of the spiritual path, the spiritual perspective on life. But this was the first time I had had a significant spiritual experience. I felt uplifted, I felt moved, I felt joyful, I felt calm, I felt that I was connecting to reality that was beyond the body and beyond the senses. And as I say, I've been reading various things that made me think this was possible, but this was the first time I directly experienced it, and it left me in no doubt that this was a possible state of consciousness that one could live in. And so you could say that that really set my feet firmly on a spiritual path.
Was this mushrooms, LSD, ayahuasca? What was it? What kind of trip was this?
Well, I'm semi-embarrassed and semi-amused to say I don't remember.
It doesn't matter.
I took all of those things, so it could
All
have
the
been
above.
any one of those.
So
Yeah.
roughly what age were you when you inquired this trip? Or
I was probably 18 or 19.
okay, So the question I ask, because I've had experience with that just a little bit. I did ayahuasca, but when you go through this experience, it's almost like you're drawing from something you've already experienced, but you can't necessarily put your finger on it because it seems familiar, but not in how most of your life was going. So a lot of times I say I'm drawing from when I was a child before I even knew anything. In fact, just kind of all I knew was experience. So it's like I believe every human being has this in them, but they don't know how to get there. And there is,
Yeah,
because I believe love and peace is a natural state of humans, because whenever we're in it, we're never trying to get out of it. But when we're miserable, we're trying to get out of it. So the question here is like, how do we get there? And like that's what this whole episode's going to be about.
yeah. How we get there is the big
Yeah.
question. But I think it starts with wanting to get there.
Yeah.
You know, it starts with some kind of experience like I had, but it can be many thousands of different other ways in which people start to feel like that is the answer to whatever is happening in their life, whether they have a good life they want to make better, or they have difficulties that they want to overcome. But making that decision, that inward decision that this is the direction I want to go in, whatever else is happening in my life, my job, my relationships, this is the inner life that I want to have.
Mhm.
And once you make that step, once you make that decision, then lots of doors open for you to pursue that. The door that opened for me was the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda.
Mhm.
I read the autobiography of a yogi, which was another almost equally transformative experience, but not as sudden or as powerful, perhaps, but equally meaningful and really, again, set my direction. It's a book that's been read by something like 30 million people now.
Yeah.
We've actually covered an episode on Yogananda.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I can imagine,
Held that
because
far.
he's been a key to a lot of people's spiritual journey in
Absolutely.
this time.
When you with this experience you had, Joseph, was it more like a feeling of wholeness, oneness? Was it remembering? What type of experience, like what kind of was it like an astral experience? Can you kind of dive a little bit deeper into, what kind of trip, if you will, that you experienced that caused you to question what is more?
Yes to all of the above. It was all of those things all at once.
Mhm.
And I could only unpack it later and for years, but the experience is unitive. You're in the now, you're whole, you're calm, you're joyful, you're loving. You know without doubt that you're something greater than a physical body and what the physical body can have you experience, allow you to experience. And it wasn't full of visions, it wasn't full of voices, it wasn't full of angels. It was really discovering that I was part of the divine, and not so much the divine, you know, intruding into my consciousness, but me realizing that the divine that I'd heard of, read about, I was one with, that it was as much me as the divine was real.
Yeah.
God, I love that.
And I like what you said earlier about when you started to discover this, all of a sudden teachers and books and whatnot had come to you. And it's kind of like what quantum physicists are trying to explain, that the universe is already well organized. So we're trying to fight against the organization rather than going with it. But when you start opening up to these concepts and ideas, the doors naturally open up to what your purpose is, or what we call our purpose, is to step into, where a lot of people are trying to figure out how to get there. I'm like, I don't believe it's our job to figure out how to get there. It's just our job to be open to the doors and walk through them when we're willing, or we're ready to walk through them. But I believe when we start to realize the universe is well organized, walking through that door is simple, where it could be scary if you're not. For a lot of people, it is scary. And that's what a lot of people like always like, what should I do? I'm like, well, get into that natural state, whatever you can. There are a lot of people using psychedelics now, but meditation seems to be proving a great source as well, where you don't have to go out and find something to do that. So explain a little bit on that, because there seems to be this natural perpetuating understanding of everything comes our way when we're in that state. We don't have to get the thing to get into state, but we're in the state, the things, what we call things, come to us.
I often say to people that the question you should be asking once you've stepped through that door, once you've felt that is really a direction you want to go in and you're willing to make that step, the question you should be asking is not what is God, but why am I not feeling God now completely and deeply? If I am one with the infinite, why don't I know that? It's this stupendous, infinite consciousness that is the most enjoyable thing you can ever experience. And yet, I don't know it. So why?
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that science has a pretty good answer to. Because from a young age, we start doing things that enable us to use the body and be aware of the world around us through the senses. And as we do that, our brain wires neural circuits to support that behavior. And without those neural circuits, we would be, every morning, we'd be an infant, right? We'd be starting from zero in terms of being able to control our body or understand what the senses are telling us. And so that is vital, that we build those circuits by first acting, and then the circuits build and we strengthen them the more we do things. But over time, those circuits become the only thing that we pay attention to. We become inadvertently neurally blind to spirit, neurally blind to higher consciousness. Not because that consciousness is blocked, just that we become totally interested in something else. Whether it's, our physical body or things we can do, our jobs, our relationships that are all sort of physically based and get this neural support. So by the time we are adults, most of us have created so many neural circuits that we're not even interested in seeking spirit. And it's when we have these kind of extraordinary experiences like I did, or we read something that moves us, that we start to seek it. Then we ask the question, which you already hinted at, how do I get back to that? How do I find that? And meditation is a really powerful tool because, put simply, meditation eliminates our awareness of the body. And by eliminating our awareness of the body, it automatically increases our awareness of spirit, of God, of infinite consciousness. And all those circuits that we've built up in the brain to help us function through the body in this world get quieted when we meditate. So the first thing that we do when we meditate, and should do, is learn to sit still. And when you learn to sit still, what happens is all the nerve signals that are coming from the body and senses naturally slow down. We just send fewer senses to our fewer signals to our brain through the nervous system because we're not doing anything. Nothing's happening. We're not actively sensing anything. We're not actively moving. And there's a region of your brain that's right at the top of your brain called the orientation association area. And it's the part of your brain that takes all those signals and turns it into the mind's eye view of where your body is from a feeling point of view. And it's very useful, right? Because otherwise, if you crash into something, you won't do anything about it. You know, so you need to know where your body is in terms of the objects around it, but also the position of your body. So this is a very useful thing. We use it all the time. But when we sit still and those signals stop or slow, then that OAA begins to give us a disappearing picture of the body. We're less aware of having a body until finally we can feel bodiless. And it's when we start to feel bodiless from that deep stillness that automatically we become much more aware of our subtle self, of our subtle body, of our emotions, of our thoughts, and particularly of our soul and our self. Our divine nature starts to fill us. And that is really the magic of meditation. You might think, people often think that if you have this bodiless experience, you would have nothing, right? There'd be nothing left, and you'd just be some empty void that isn't wonderful. But in fact, that bodilessness leads to this wonderful, expansive, loving, joyful, calm, life-transforming experience, which is simply connecting to who and what we are in the deepest way.
Yeah. And for those who are tuning in right now, Joseph has written a book called Break Through the Limits of the Brain. And you're touching on a lot of the stuff right now that you're featuring in that book, right, Joseph?
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're an author of many different books. You know, you've got a few, you not only write, you know, on these type of topics, you publish fiction, etc. But this Break Through the Limits of the Brain, I love where you're going with this because it gives people a way to satisfy the analytical side of the brain of how does this work, what's going on. You're explaining that through the, you know, the neural connections, the neural pathways that you're talking about, and explaining, you know, so we can kind of understand and, you know, see behind the curtain, if you will, about what's kind of going on with this instrument and how we've gotten to the state that we are in today, which is, you know, often, like you just mentioned, blocked. You know, we feel so blocked from this connection. Well, the reason we feel blocked from this connection is because these types of concepts, you know, aren't being introduced in Western culture. You know, in fact, they're looked at as woo-woo. They're looked at as you know, not validated by science, etc. And so when you can take science, take the actual science side of things and give people that ability to dive deeper, it allows them to connect more to this, you know, subtle body and understand what they're going through and what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking to something that I try to work through in my books, Physics of God, Break Through the Limits of the Brain, which is the scientific conviction or it's not a scientific conviction, I said that wrong, the conviction of scientists that the only reality there is physical. And that, as we know, matter is energy. And so that matter-energy interaction is, from the point of view of many scientists, the only possible reality. And that is a huge barrier for many people to taking that step through the door to open up to higher realities, deeper realities. And so what I try to do in my books is show that although many scientists have that opinion, science itself as a means of discovery doesn't say that. The discoveries of science actually lead to subtle reality.
Right.
Quantum physics basically is the head-scratching conundrum of all for people who think that the physical world is the only world, because quantum physics has what is generally referred to as quantum weirdness, where matter doesn't behave like matter ought to behave, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't, because quantum physics is essentially peeking into another concurrent realm of subtle energy that is basically warp and woof with matter, but is beyond matter. And being able to kind of walk people through in my books that connection and many more, particularly M theory, that indicate science doesn't eliminate the possibility of subtle reality. In fact, it opens the door to subtle reality. And it's not science that says matter and energy are the only thing. It is a very influential minority of scientists who hold that opinion.
Well, where do you think this stems from? Do you think this is a clearly articulated and way? So I guess what I'm going with it is like, we take science, right? And we take data and we flip that data to match whatever our agenda is or whatever our talking points, are.
Right.
And it's been happening our entire, since we've had media, or since we've been, trying to lead the public, etc. So, I mean, growing up, like, for example, I always use the example, I grew up in an age where Got Milk was a huge campaign and it was being pushed. And, if you didn't drink your milk, you wouldn't have strong bones, all of that. And
Right.
then we start to find out that, that data was manipulated. And in fact, a good majority of the population has trouble digesting milk. And so you start learning all these different things throughout life about how we have had our data manipulated when it comes to how it's presented to us in the public. So do you think this is like a calculated way to divert the public from their true self that has been going on for decade after decade? Or what's your take on why this science has been presented to us in such a material fashion, like only a material scientific world?
I don't tend to think that there is a active conspiracy of any kind to keep people from their spiritual self. I think getting past what our senses are telling us is the hard part. And most people never do. Yeah. And even if they embrace a religion, I think for many of those people, God remains a distant reality that they don't expect to ever directly experience. So I think there's just a lot of things in society that reinforce it, and I don't think people are actively keeping us from it. But it is pretty strong part of human nature to, as you say, pick the facts or interpret the facts the way you want in order to make your case for whatever you're making. We see that in every field, politics especially, where
law.
It's gotten to the point now where there seems to be separate universes of facts that are, driving different.
It's difficult to navigate.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because in your book, Physics of God, you kind of get into the understanding of quantum physics. And this is the thing I like to touch on, kind of touching it to Mike's asking, like talking about the milk and how we believe in that. Well, the basis of quantum physics is a double slit experiment. Can you explain that
Yeah.
to our audience? Because, part of that is when we observe the electron going through the slit, it does something that's expected of it seeing it, but we don't observe it, it becomes this all-encompassing wave. So I think that's kind of what we're touching on is if I believe milk is bad for me, eventually my body will soon take on the response to it. So there's something in there in the quantum field about belief and what's really going on. And the problem is if I have a belief and I experience it, and Mike has a belief and he experiences it, and I think my belief is correct, we have this great argument. And I think that's what happens with some of these scientists that think that the physical world is fundamental. They don't want to be wrong about that. And I believe their belief of the physical world is fundamental. They have evidence that, again, they're not willing to look at everything else. That's why they're only seeing what's in front of them. So for the average person out there, they want to know what's the truth.
Yeah.
And the truth is it's
Both.
yes. Like I think there's empirical truth, but the empirical truth is that we exist. Change is constant. What you put out is what you get back. But how we live in that truth will be in individual truths and then collective truths as well. But
Well,
yeah,
I think, you raise a lot of really key points that people wrestle with.
Yeah.
I think underneath all of them is this interpretation of what the world around us actually is. And if you have the interpretation that the world around us is this unyielding material reality, then almost everything else you said from a logical point of view is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
If you really believe that this physical reality in which we exist is the only reality, then, there can't be a God. There can't be the power of belief. There can't be the power of magnetism to attract stuff to you, because that's all nonsense in the context of that purely materialistic view of reality. So our beliefs don't tend to change unless we have experiences that make us at least question beliefs.
Yeah.
And that double slit experiment is one of the ones that I think contributed to a lot of people questioning that basic narrative that the physical world is the only thing there is. And it's a difficult experiment to explain. I'll try to walk our listeners through it. But basically what it comes to is that it was a proof of an assertion that was made early on. This was like the 1920s, maybe 1930s, that everything can exist as matter or it can exist as energy. That this basic dichotomy, which is kind of mind-blowing. I mean, what it's saying is that my body can exist as a bunch of atoms and molecules, or it can exist as waves of pure energy. Now that's pretty out there
Yeah.
when you have a materialist belief. So when the double slit experiment essentially proved it, it left a lot of physicists scratching their heads. So what the double slit experiment does as an actual experimental apparatus is that it sends light through two vertical slits in a barrier. And it allows light to come into a chamber, a completely contained chamber, only through those two slits. And ordinary light, when sent through the two slits, will immediately fan out. Once it's past the slits, it'll begin to fan out like water waves do when you drop a rock in water. You know, they just radiate out into increasing size circles.
Mm-hmm.
So light does the same thing. And when those two side by side fans fanning out wave-like patterns of light intersect with each other, wherever there's a trough that meets another trough, the trough gets deeper. And wherever there's a wave that meets, a peak of the wave that meets another peak, it gets higher. And where troughs meet peaks, they cancel out. And at the back of this chamber, if you will, and we're talking about really a teensy tiny space, but at the back of this chamber, there's a sensor. And that sensor, when the light gets to it with all the intersection that takes place, all the interference that takes place, ends up having bands of more light and less light. It's more light where troughs meet troughs and peaks meet peaks, and no light where peaks and troughs cancel each other out. And this is what's known as an interference pattern. You can develop it using water waves as well. Yeah. But that basic pattern is, well, basically the subject of the rest of the double slit experiments, because sometime in the 1920s, 1930s, physicists figured out how to send light through the slits as photons. Now, photons are the sort of material way in which light can behave. So light can behave as waves, it can behave as matter. When it behaves as matter, it becomes a photon. So physicists wanted to know, well, what would happen if instead of a continuous light source, what if we sent one photon at a time through these double slits? And it's kind of amazing that they could figure out how to even do that, right? I mean, scientists are incredibly clever in all the apparatus that they develop to test their theories, and the kind of breakthroughs they have to make even to develop the apparatus to make the test are extraordinary. So they sent the photons through one at a time, and because they were sending it at intervals of several seconds, in order for anything to build up on the sensor in the back of the chamber, they needed to leave it alone, right? They needed to let it run. So let's imagine they let it run all night, went home, had dinner, kissed their wife, came back the next morning and checked to see what was on the sensor. Their minds were pretty much blown by the fact that what they saw on their sensor was an interference pattern, which suggested that there were still two streams of light interfering with each other, creating this wave-like pattern, when in fact they'd only sent one photon at a time through it. So this was an area of huge discussion when these kind of experiments were done and confirmed that that's the way it behaved. And they tried and tried to figure out why, if only one photon at a time is going through the slits, anything at all could possibly interfere with it. You know, is the photon interfering with itself? What is actually happening? What they expected to see was not an interference pattern, but two vertical patterns on the sensor that were, you know, very bright, if you will, because all the light energy would have been concentrated on those. But they didn't get it. So some scientists, physicists finally decided that, well, maybe we can learn something if we identify which slit each individual photon went through. Because the way they had it set up, that wasn't measured. They just had the results of photons coming through the slits, but didn't have any knowledge of that. So they worked very hard to come up with an apparatus that would measure but not affect, measure but not influence those photons going through those two slits. And they set it all up, turned the apparatus on, went home, had their dinner, came back the next day, and they once again had their minds blown, because now they saw what they expected to see in the first place. They saw two vertical slits, or two vertical patterns matching the slits of where the photons had impacted the sensor. And what they eventually concluded from all this is that it was only because they had measured it that light behaved like matter. And in the absence of a measurement, light behaved as energy waves. And they went on to extend these experiments, and they're still doing these experiments to this day, sending atoms and molecules and ever bigger molecules through the two slits. And they find the exact same thing, that even big molecules don't act like matter. They act like waves unless they're measured, and then they act like matter. So this fundamental dichotomy of the reality around us, that it only behaves like a measurement, it behaves like matter if we measure it, left a lot of physicists wondering, what is reality then? What underlies this effect? And they began to but they began to speculate that consciousness, which is part of that measurement process, is really more fundamental to reality than either energy or matter. And very outstanding physicists like Einstein and Heisenberg and many others actually came to the conclusion that consciousness is fundamental to reality, and that consciousness affects reality. So this goes back to the other part of your question about how can our beliefs affect reality? It's because our beliefs are born of consciousness, right? And the way in which our consciousness is formed, the way in which our thoughts are structured, actually affects the experience of reality that we have. One of my favorite examples of that, which is, I think, one of the most mind-blowing examples of how belief shapes reality, is from the world of multiple personality disorder.
Yeah.
So multiple personality disorder, as most people know, is where a single person has distinct and multiple different personalities that are not just a person taking on a persona, but that person believing entirely that they are that persona. A lot of multiple personality disorder sufferers discover their disorder because they go to a psychologist and they say, I am just blacking out on most of my life.
Yeah, they're not necessarily aware of the other person.
They're literally not. They're completely unaware of any other experience any of their other personalities are having. So their belief in their personality is total, totally committed to, this is who I am. Some of them can speak foreign languages that the others can't.
Change eye color.
Some of them have physical characteristics that the others don't.
Yeah, diseases and everything. It's interesting. Yeah.
But the one that, the example that I find the most extraordinary is of a woman, I believe she was a German woman, but it doesn't matter, who came to the psychologist initially blind, except for one personality that wasn't blind.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And eventually they kind of switched that through therapy so that most of her personalities could see to varying degrees, but one personality remained blind. Now, this is not, you know, you often hear people talk about, well, it must be some kind of hysteria, or, you know, there's some magic thing that happens that makes people blind. But in fact, she was neurologically blind. They could shine really bright lights directly in her eyes when she was in her blind personality, and there was nothing registering in the neurons of her brain. So she was blind when she was in that personality. And in her other 9 personalities, I believe the number is, she could see to varying degrees. This would mean, for this to be true, that the neurons in her brain instantly change when she goes into another personality, that her belief in what that personality can do is so strong that it changes the reality of her body down to atoms and molecules.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
It is. So essentially what you're saying, it's because I've gathered this from listening to this and it still blows my mind. But it's not just our observation of the outside world, it's our beliefs, or the observation we filter through our beliefs is what changed the world. And again, if you don't change a belief, you seemingly don't get a broad enough change to think things are changeable. So obviously for this individual, this woman who had this multiple personality disorder, she was completely unaware of the other ones when she was in a particular one, and that particular one reigned. But yet from an observer, like the psychologist, realized, oh my God. So for the average person out there that isn't, they are aware, like if they come home and they're dealing with their wife or a client, we pull on these different personalities, but I'm still aware of the other ones where they can influence it. But if there is this great change you want to have in your life, there is ways and steps to do that. For one is, the way I do it is not care if the situation's around, allow it, if you will. And then when we start to allow it, we see other possibilities. Like if this situation, if I could almost take a situation and say, okay, this is neither bad or good, it just is. All of a sudden it softens up, and I'm able to look at it differently, maybe give a more positive attribute towards it. And when I do, I've noticed in my life, when I give a circumstance that I've been in multiple times a more positive outlook, it starts to change, especially the way I feel about it. And then it literally physically changes, kind of like almost a double slit experiment. When you observe it, it actually stays a particle. But when it's not, it's a wave. So it's just, what belief do we have as we're looking at the outside world, where most people are trying to change the outside world. It's like changing out mirrors so your hair looks better. It's a mere reflection. But if we actually go within and change the story, the concept, like the woman that had multiple personality disorders, you'll literally get a completely different output in the world in which you live. And I think utilizing those multiple personality disorder examples helps us to say, well, if I start to change my persona in a more preferential way, the outside world will support that. It will show me that it's working, just like the mirror shows that, okay, I changed my hair, therefore my hair has changed.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the way I've come to understand that, and I'm just describing the exact same thing that you're talking about, just using different terms, is that we draw things to ourselves. So we are magnetic in a way, not meant in the way that iron can be magnetic and draw bits of metal to it. But as an analogy to that, we are magnetic, and that when we start to shift in any way in what we're doing, shift from our habits.
Mhm.
We draw new thoughts. We draw new emotions. We draw new people. We draw new opportunities that we literally pull from this kind of infinite ocean of possibilities around us. We draw out of that what matches where we're going, where we're thinking, what we want to accomplish. And you can use this in all kinds of ways. You can use this for success. You can use this for the kind of relationship you want to have. You can use this especially for drawing spiritual experience. But we do draw it. Now, if you can think of that as literally changing the reality around you, or you can think of it as pulling out of the reality around you those particular things. But either way, your reality in terms of what you experience and what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis can change.
Yeah.
See, that's so good.
And I think too, it's like the concept of like when they get into this multiverse universe or what have you. It's almost like coming to an understanding that everything that exists already exists. So like a radio, it's easy to explain like a radio TV, the way I look at it. Like every song is known right now, but depending on what station I tune into, I'm going to receive that type of music or that particular music. I get very direct right now because of Spotify, but it doesn't mean other music doesn't exist. But I had to tune into a certain frequency. So I think right now what humans are trying to do, how do I control my frequency to get into the states to where I'm experiencing more positive attributes than negative. Negative is probably they want to do something, but the belief is taken the other way. And that's where the interference pattern comes in, I believe, because we're trying to move so the crest and the trough are hitting each other and canceling each other out. But if you're moving in a direction with the belief moving in the same way, it seems like the expansion of the wave in, from a psychological and now physics ways of explaining it. So people like how, and I think like you touched on with meditation teaches us how to get into different frequency settings, more of a neutral one, and then start to choose more preferential experiences. Because that's it. It's an experience we're having it. Until we have it, we really can't articulate it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, and
Well,
that's
I think the key there is what I would generally call concentration. You might think of it as focus, or you might just think of it as getting your heart set. Generally when you hear that phrase, getting your heart set on something is bad, right?
yeah.
Because you're gonna be disappointed, right? As that's your mom used to say, now don't get your heart set on that because it might not happen. But I think the reality is if you really truly do set your heart in a good way, not on a real specific thing, but get your heart set on moving in a particular way in your life, it makes you more concentratedly interested in that, more concentrated in the sense that the thoughts you are attracting are also supportive of that. And then that makes your life unfold in the way you want it to unfold. Now, it may not unfold rapidly, but the more focused you are, the more concentrated you are, the more absorbed you are in what you want to do, the more quickly and the more fully those things will come to you, that your outer life will match your inner life, that how you want to move through life will be in congruence with what's actually happening in your life.
How did you discover this in your personal life, Joseph? Like, what is an example that you can provide the audience where you began to experience, oh my God, the more I, open up to this, or the more I focus my concentration and attention on this, I begin to experience it.
I think to begin with, I had, like a lot of people have, a kind of aha moments where I needed to do something.
Mhm.
And I can't remember a specific, but I'll just make one up where, I had to learn about something, make something happen. It could be as simple as I was organizing a banquet and I needed to get all the pieces of the banquet together. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I had to do it. And then I turn around and the first person I meet is someone who has organized banquets,
Right.
and I learn that they organize banquets because my mind is on it. And I say, well, if you were me, what would you do? And they say, well, I've organized 100 banquets and here's where you need to start. That people come to you, information comes to you that fits what it is you're needing to do. And the first time they happen, you might think, oh, that was a coincidence.
Yeah.
The
But it's
second time,
magnetism
you
is
might think, well,
yeah.
that's amazing. These coincidences happen a lot. And then finally you realize, oh, I'm working a law here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I stay focused, I will get solutions to come. And they can be anything from the right people to money to ideas. And then gradually, later and later in my life, as I got better at deliberately working that process, I found it invaluable in my writing.
Yeah.
Creativity in writing for me is a matter of making sure that I draw the best ideas into what I'm saying and that I support them with the best examples of how that principle works. So what I have found is I just need to stay focused on it a lot. You may have read this, that writers will say that about themselves, that you don't just write when you write. You don't just write when you're sitting at the computer
We're always writing.
typing away at the keyboard. You write as you're standing there doing the dishes because ideas are coming in, you're examining them, you're thinking, does that fit? And you're remembering, oh, I read an article years ago about a person who could do X. I wonder if I can find that because that really fits the point I'm trying to make right now. So I'm writing in the shower, I'm writing while I'm doing dishes, I'm writing while I walk, I'm writing when I can't sleep, and then I'm writing when I write.
Yeah.
And I found that there's much more power to that because when I finally do sit down to write, I'm often just typing out what I've already concluded is what I need to say. I'm not fumbling around trying this approach and then this approach and then this approach. I've already winnowed down what's going to be the best approach for like the next paragraph, right? It's not, you're always, as a writer, you're always working kind of on the pit head. You're writing right where you need to go next. And I get long range thoughts for my writing that come to me all the time, but I don't get too attached to them. I think, well, that could be a good idea. But until I've actually gotten to the place where that idea might be a good one, I don't know whether I'm going to use it or not. But the immediate ideas that I've been revolving in my mind are the ones that I'm then, first thing in the morning, I'm ready to put into words.
Yeah.
How can you explain kind of that fine line that we walk when we're having this focused attention and concentration? Because too often this can get mixed up, and we can even put a kind of resistance in the way that's kind of repelling that magnetism from us. Whether that's coming from a state of lack, worry, stress, etc. Can you talk about kind of sharpening that concentration for those listening and the best way to magnetize yourself to that you do want, rather than repel or create resistance?
I don't think there's any one trick. I think that the more you do it, the more you do anything creative, whether that's, your main vocation or an avocation, the better you get at doing it well. And I think as you do things well, you begin to trust that you are going to get good ideas. You begin to trust your ideas. And I think at first we tend to think, well, I had a great idea.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
But you still got it, right?
Yeah.
So you shouldn't condemn yourself for thinking it was your idea, but just over time you realize, oh, I drew ideas. I was able to pull ideas or creative solutions or all these other things I've already talked about to me. And the more you do it, the more years you do it for whatever purpose. And you could be a programmer, you could be a carpenter. Everything that you do allows for this continuous improvement and refinement of how you do it. And a lot of it is you're pulling these things to you, and you gradually trust them more and more to the point where you just expect it. I mean, I expect good ideas to come to me now, particularly when I meditate. I try not to meditate exclusively on writing. It's really tempting to, because I write so much. But ideally, I meditate and go deep first, and then I open up to the ideas. And that's when I get them the best, because I don't have any other distractions.
Are you
I'm
setting an intention
just
with
me
that?
and my thoughts?
Just, yeah, the thoughts. Yeah. It's kind of, I think, like when you look at religion, they have a thing called faith. And the more and more people trust in, and that's probably where the understanding of God came in, that there is an organizing principle out there that's working. But if you don't use it, it won't work. If I have a GPS and don't use it, I'll never see the fulfillment of how it works. But like you said, if you stay on the point of the pen in it with a GPS, I can go outward and say, okay, I want to drive my car, from here to San Diego. It's roughly about 5.5 hours. I know that, but just say I didn't know that. And it would put in there, you would, in a particular part in San Diego, you'll reach your destination 5.5 hours, but I have to pay attention to what's happening now. So then the GPS will give me coordinates such as make a right-hand turn. And if I fill that and I keep going along the way, I'll see these signs along the way. I'll say San Diego, 290 miles or whatever. It gives me a little advancement that I'm heading in the right direction, but I'm still in this moment, in this flow of doing it. And what's interesting is we trust the GPS more than we trust what I call is our higher selves. That, like, when you get into that state, you know that you're going to get right information. Just like when I get my car, I know it's going to get me to where I need to go without even knowing how to get there, particularly in that time. Hence why I'm using GPS. So technologies now is kind of showing us it's more fractal attribute of who we are. And like how do you, like Mike asked, like, how do we get people to do that? I'm like, you just have to trust it. And I say, hey, if you want to trust a GPS you've never used before, just drive around in your neighborhood and see if it gets you to the candy store that you know where it is. And
Right.
when you start to do that, I'm like, okay, this works. Let me go someplace I've never been before. And, I have all day. So if I get lost, so be it. And you do that. And all of a sudden, like, my God, this works. Now you can apply it to your everyday life. And then you'll be living by that system. And how you utilize it, how you explain it will be different than other people. But that's how I see it. I trust it. There are days where I forget it works.
Uh-huh.
I have those days, but then I realize, well, wait a minute, this works. Why am I questioning it? I
Right.
get these impulses that feel positive, and then all of a sudden I let go, and then bam, like you said, I become a magnet, and I attract the information to where I am in the moment of where I am right now. Just like the GPS knows exactly where I am to get me where I need to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I would think there's like a divine GPS for
Yeah.
us,
Oh yeah.
that we can tune into. But there are other GPS signals, right? that whatever we think we want or need to do has its own kind of logic. And I think the reason why we don't trust our higher divine GPS is because we sideline ourselves a lot when we just go on intuition, and we sideline ourselves ultimately, typically what I experienced when I look back on whatever disaster I just wrought in my life, that I got too attached to my own idea or to what I wanted to have happen, right? And that, I would crash and burn in that particular aspect of my life. And it made me a little leery of committing so completely to my GPS.
Yeah.
So what we need to do, what I found, is the more I meditate and the more I connect to the divine, the more I feel the divine, the more I recognize that divine feeling as a GPS signal.
Yeah.
That there should be an echo of that feeling where then you can trust it even if you don't know you're going to San Diego, right? You don't really totally know where you're going, but you say, okay, I'm going to proceed as if you want me to write this book. Or in my life, let's say, I'm going to proceed as if you want me to be a writer. So I'm thinking I'm going to go part-time in my job. Big decision, right? Because I don't have all the extra funds I need already saved if that doesn't work. But so I exercise my GPS sense, and I get an echo of that divine feeling that I get in meditation. So I think, okay, I could be on the right track. Now, as a friend of mine once said, we often get guidance, and he would just, characterize it as we get the guidance to go north, but then we stop listening and we keep going north, when really you have to keep listening because 10 miles out of town, the next signal was to go east,
Yeah.
right? You have to keep listening. And in some ways, that's what our whole process of learning to be competent human beings is about, is it learning to listen all the time to our divine GPS while we're doing whatever we do. Because ultimately, listening to our divine GPS is what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of successful people will that may not know this or maybe not explain it this way, they use the word discipline, because discipline is a focused energy. And a lot of times I tell myself, I come to understanding it's not necessarily what I'm doing, it's how I feel about what I'm doing that generates, although what I'm doing, there's a correlation in my life, but it's how I feel about it that generates more of a magnetism for me to go along the way. Because if I'm doing something I don't rather like it, I'm going to run interference patterns as well. And then the question I ask, why don't I like this? Maybe I didn't pay attention to the GPS early on. So disciplines are more of understanding this process or this outward or universal process. But that's why I can't take my discipline and give it to somebody else. I could show
Right. It's a learned trait. Yeah.
yeah, but there is some commonality between all disciplines and mechanically, but yet there's something else different because of, every athlete has something in common, but as it breaks apart, as the baseball player is talking to the football player, well, there's different outputs in the game, but yet there's some 0 point that's the same for all athletes. But as you go further away from that, it starts to change.
Right.
And it's kind
Right.
of,
The
that's what,
commonalities aren't as tight. Yeah.
exactly. That's why we have to be careful about trying to follow somebody else's discipline rather than finding out which one's great for you. but utilizing somebody else's can give you something to stand on, I guess, or something to.
Yeah, and as you say, there is that sort of core that you can recognize. And by recognizing that it is core, you give it more respect as something you probably ought to develop for yourself. Where, so the athlete trains X amount of time every day, and all athletes train X amount of time all day. So that should be an indicator to us that if we want to be able to do something, we need to do the equivalent of training X amount of time every day. That's a key thing. But we don't have to do it at 6 a.m. in the morning. We don't have to do it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We don't have to do it in any specific way. We can make it our own.
Yes.
For me, discipline was always a mixed thing, because I would enthusiastically embrace various disciplines only to realize 2 months later that, hey, I'm not doing that anymore. What happened? Now that I embark on things and then I don't keep using them. And gradually over time, I learned for myself that I had to do a process before I embraced a discipline. And that process was, what is most going to help me do what I think I'm needing to do or wanting to do?
Yeah.
And tune into that first, and then ask myself, well, of that kind of core collection of things that I could do, which one will I actually do?
Yeah.
And after decades of trying things and not keeping going, I have a pretty good idea of what I will and won't actually stick with. So I've learned to be more successful in my discipline. I wouldn't call myself a highly disciplined person, but I'm gradually more and more disciplined over time, because I pick the things to focus on, to develop, that I will actually do and I will keep doing. That's the other question I ask myself. I will start this, but will I keep it? Will I add it to my regimen
Yeah.
and keep it in my regimen?
Yeah.
And if I get yeses to that, then I think about how to include it, how to develop it.
Yeah.
But discipline becomes, in a way, for me, the habitual structure of moving towards the things that I want to move towards.
Yeah. And
And
that's,
that
yeah.
they're not bad things. They're not hard things. They're not things I don't want to do. Discipline is my friend. Discipline is that structure that's going to get me to what I want to get to.
Yeah, and I think that's intention, because I think, like, if someone has try to set discipline to lose weight, but they don't, all they want to lose weight, it's kind of like a very general statement. That's going to seem difficult. But if they dig in deeper to, I want to lose weight because I want to, as you put these other attributes, become lighter, be healthier, all that type of stuff, that discipline becomes easier because you could see the narrative at the end of the rainbow, if you will. But most people pull disciplines in. I'm like, I just want to try this.
I just
Like,
want to be rich. I
yeah,
just want to
yeah.
be this.
It's like getting in a car and just aimlessly driving. I'm like, you're gonna eventually get lost. Like, you have to have something to look towards. It may veer you though. Sometimes some disciplines take you to another discipline, just like heading north. At some point, getting out of town, and all of a sudden you have to head east. But I think it's the intention in the moment to why. When you set that, and why do I want to lose weight? Well, if it's because other people think I'm heavy, I'm like, well, that might not fly. All these other things. So when you really get into it and you really want to lose weight based on all the narratives you tell yourself, it will become easier. And then when you start to lose weight, oh my God, this works.
Right.
And I'm just using it as a very general thing, because a lot of people start their new year off with that and they always fail by March. It's because it's usually outward worries about what other people are going to think to why they want to do it. And like, yeah, you can't keep your head. It has to be an internal job, inside job.
Well, I think the hardest thing people do is try to stop doing something that they want to do. And they want to do it even though it's not good for them, and they know it's not good for them, but they still want to do it. So eating is, the classic example, but you can ascribe that to many different things. And I think that it's almost always going to fail if you try to stop doing something you want to do.
Mhm.
You have to be strategic and figure out, well, are there things that would offset what I want to do that's bad for me, that are things that are good for me that I want to do? And find those, however small they might be. You know, one of the ways to lose weight is not so much to worry about what you're eating or how much you're eating, it's to get exercise, right? To establish taking a walk every day, or something that sounds good to you, that maybe you've always wanted to do. And therefore you start with that and build up good things that eventually crowd out the negative thing.
Yeah.
Joseph, let me ask you, changing directions a little bit here. So you had this experience at 18, 19, right? We went to college, you know, you began to kind of dive deeper into the sciences, as you explained. You studied chemistry, microbiology, physics, all of the above. So kind of bridge the gap between when you started your professional life. So you were a CEO of a company called TriStream. You know, you did some internet-based, can you kind of tell us about your company, what you kind of were doing there, your role there, and how you mirrored this consciousness life that you've stumbled upon? And were you actively involved with these concepts and beliefs as you were in this work flow, or kind of tell me a little bit about your consciousness background and how you brought that into the workforce?
Well, you leaped ahead pretty far in my life to when I established my business, TriStream.
Okay.
The first thing that really happened that significantly engaged me in a different life was the discovery of Yogananda's teachings, and that led me step by step to the discovery of a spiritual group called Ananda, of which I'm a part. That,
You're a founding member of that, right?
yeah, one of the early founders of the community, but it already existed before I got there. I got to join a bunch of people who were already committed to it, and it was, you know, just a wonderful step forward in life for me. I was surrounded by people who meditated. I was surrounded by people who embraced the teachings of Yogananda. The community leader, Swami Kriyananda, was a direct disciple of Yogananda. And all of that really shaped my first years out of college. And I was drawn into managerial kind of positions within the community, which eventually got me to starting a business, web development business called TriStream.
So you were already on the path.
Pardon me?
We're already on the path prior.
Yes, I was already thoroughly immersed for almost 20 years in these teachings and living them. Now, I had been applying them to business. Within our community, we have a number of businesses, retail businesses, et cetera, that I either managed or was kind of the manager's manager. And so I already had some real world practical experience in business. So when I went out to start my own company, because I had 4 children, some of whom were beginning to knock on the door of going to college, I realized that I needed to be able to generate more income than I would be able to within any position at Ananda. And it really came quite naturally to me at that point to infuse the new business with some of the principles that I'd been already steeped in these other positions I'd had. But I think the main ones were really about how you work with people. I didn't try to influence any one of the, at the end, 40 people that I had working for me. I didn't try to influence them to become meditators or to get interested in Yogananda's teachings. I just applied the principles of respect, of trying to tune into what particular people were good at, what did they like to do, and to try to support them in doing that in a way in the company that they could grow, valuing them.
Mhm.
And I found that that sort of core ingredient really helped things flourish, trying to attract people to the business who were positive, creative, versatile people. I found that having too many people who had one speciality within that world was not good, because if there wasn't any demand for that particular speciality, there wasn't a lot they could do. But if you had people who knew how to do multiple different things, things flowed much better. But these are kind of the practical realities of running the business. For me, the spiritual reality was just, again, tuning into that divine GPS. You know, if there was a company decision to be made as the president of the company, my decisions would have a lot of influence on what we were doing and where we're going. So I felt doubly, triply the need to tune in before making decisions like that. And I made some good ones. I made some bad ones. My divine GPS indicator is still not perfect. And it was not perfect then. You know,
Yeah.
you just
But
have to go with something.
yeah, there's always
Life goes on. You do the best you can. But I think I made more good decisions than bad. And so it was growthful for me as well as for the entity as a business.
yeah. And like as like you look at science, not scientists per se, but just science as a whole, you mentioned earlier, um, we'll never fully understand the causation of maybe anything, but we'll see correlation. So that's why there's always opening for interference patterns coming into our world. But I think when we're hit with what we call failures, it takes us to another level. If we're willing to look at it that way, you can stop doing something because you're scared to continue. So even what we call failures in of itself is a success. So now, like at some level, we know not to do that. We don't even need to focus on it anymore, and it gets more refined. Like people say, we're not perfect. I'm like, well, maybe we aren't, but the system onto itself isn't perfect. So the misreading it, we're trying to understand it with the human mind, and we really can't. The human mind's good at knowing that experience was good. The human mind's good at understanding congruent or interference patterns. So like, okay, that was an interference pattern. Let's move on from that. But to perceive what's going to happen or conceive what's going to happen, that's something else. And that's why we're always going to run into these um, parts where we seemingly fail. But we start to look at that as like, well, I've learned something here. It keeps growing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's why one of the sort of old chestnuts of what the spiritual life is that we're incarnated
Yeah.
in a school.
Yep.
We're here to learn. We're not here to be infinitely satisfied by what's here.
Yeah.
We're here to learn how to grow,
Yeah.
to become more competent, to become more sensitive, to become more loving, especially, but to tune into the divine more than anything else, so that we can graduate from this school and not have to come back and learn more lessons of the same type.
Yeah.
I think
Are you familiar with Michael Singer?
Yes,
Yeah.
only in that I've read his book.
Okay, yeah, because he was big on Yogananda as well, and that's how he got.
Yeah,
Yeah, and but like obviously he wrote two. Well, he the two books I read with the Surrender Experiment, and that's kind of like it sounds like the journey that you're on too. Is like you just at the end of the day, you could see that you had more successes than failures, um, and you allowed this to happen in the understanding of where the word surrender comes in, and we trust it's going to happen. Yeah, some days like things come in, we have to open our eyes to that, be more protective. But as the day goes on, when I stop trying to force this has to happen, my life becomes easier. But when this has to happen, I'm like, I don't know why this even has to happen. I think about this is what I want. I'm like, well, why do you want that? Did
right,
someone feed into you? I don't know. But there's a feeling inside of me of peace. That is who I am. And when I'm in that state, things tend to always work out. And then sometimes things don't work out, but then it's like, well, how at peace were you? I'm like, okay, this is a little game. It's kind of like what my dad did with me. My dad taught me how to box, and if my right hand was down, he hit me on the right side, or fake the left to hit to the right to get me to say, keep that hand up.
right,
So, yeah, and it was part of that was the game. You're never going to be perfect at it, but the more you focus on it, the more in the flow you get in it. Then when you're like, hey, look how good I am, boom, you're out of the flow.
right,
You kind of mess yourself up there. But
right. But the things that we go through are really there to teach us to stay in the flow.
yeah,
Yep.
They're not really to make us absolute experts at anything. We might, in the process, become absolute experts in something, but only if it leads to staying in the flow. Is that worth having done, right?
yeah,
That's also something that we learn, that ultimately we're here to feel divine joy in every moment that we're alive, to live in the now, to live in the moment, but not to live for the moment, not to ignore that we have responsibilities and duties, and but to be able to, and that's the real challenge, I think. Anybody can go live in the moment on the beach in Maui, right? But can you live in the moment when your business is failing and people are mad at you? That's when you really have the sort of spiritual muscles to um, succeed in what the spiritual lesson is that you came into this world to learn.
yeah, that would be a PhD right there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, sitting at the beach on Maui, that's like your summer break. That's and I think that's what we all want to know. Like, why does somebody join the Navy SEALs? Like, why would you do that? Because they want to see how strong they are under serious duress.
right.
And so I think all of us coming to this planet, so to speak, we want to see what kind of distress we can deal with. And we realize we go and we live in the moment, we tend to deal with it better. But a lot of people think like, okay, it's law of attraction. Why is this happening to me? I'm like, why not? Like you think what's best for you, you don't. But if you can just allow this thing that seems distressful to you and just allow it as best you can, it can teach you something that you're stronger than you think you are. I used to get overwhelmed at the stupidest stuff when I was younger. Now I'll get overwhelmed, but the overwhelmment lasts maybe 3 minutes, you know, and that's because my wife is making me take the garbage out in the middle of the night and I fell asleep. It's so like seriously, she did that last night. She's like, you didn't take the garbage out. I'll
Had to
do it in the
wake up.
morning. Yeah. But
I do feel like Earth is a school, Joseph, and I like how you said that. I believe that we choose our parents, we choose our situation, our siblings. Like we make that contract before we come down here, and it's what we want to learn, what we want to experience. And you kind of touch on this a little bit in your Breakthrough the Limit of the Brain book, but like so the early stages in life, I think, is how you refer to it, is kind of where we take in all of our conditioning. And I feel like that's where we're kind of being baked into our character, if you will, like who we signed on to be, the type of conditioning we wanted to, have the certain experience we came here to have. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's
0 to
we're
7.
conditioned. I don't know how much exactly it reflects who we are,
Okay.
but it gives us the raw material of capabilities, beliefs, outlook that we're going to be using as we go forward. A lot of spiritual teachers that I've read indicate that our deeper character tends to come out slowly and over the decades of our life. And that when we start to reach the ripe old age like me, I feel like I'm finally who I am. And that all these roles I played up till now were pieces of that, but they weren't the whole. And that I'm finally able to, be the person and do the things that I really came in to do in a meaningful way. But nonetheless, regardless of whether I even ever got there, and who knows if I really have gotten there, the learning process was essential, to go from what, sometimes it's overcoming our conditioning. Few of us are raised in a family where we understand that, becoming our divine potential is the purpose of life. It'd be great if there were a lot more of those families that could pass that on to their children in a way that their children would embrace. It's another matter altogether. But few of us do. Most of us are kind of born into the same cultural, societal zeitgeist that everybody else is. And that's our starting point to, unwind from that in a way and find deeper truth.
I like that. So right now we're hearing a lot, just about 2024. A lot of people are very optimistic about where things are going. We're stepping into a different age when it comes to kind of the astrology chart. So you're hearing a lot of people talk about different stuff. How can you relate that to your work with the Yugas? Can you tell us a little bit about cycles and where you see us going right now currently?
Well, the Yugas, obviously you guys know, but for your listeners, the Yugas is a 24,000 year cyclic conception of the rise and fall of civilization and human consciousness that comes to us from India, but it's echoed in a number of cycles, like the Greek cycle of the Golden Age, Silver Age, Bronze Age, and Iron Age. You'll find it in North American Indian myths. You'll find it in Norse myths. It's really all over the world, which gives some credibility to its truth that there really is a cycle rather than a straight line development that is the commonly accepted view of how we got to where we are today, that we started as cavemen and gradually became more and more able to do things. And then we settled down and started growing crops. And the next thing you know, we're checking our iPhone compulsively 25 times a day. And that's just a straight line between those two things. Where the Yugas says that there were higher ages in the past and that there will be higher ages again in the future, and that we are in a relatively low time in comparison to the more paradisical high ages of the Yugas. And if you are interested in it, I can unhesitatingly recommend my book on the Yugas, because it describes the footprint. It describes all of the information that's coming to us from the past, but interpreted in this different light. And a lot of things that are either downplayed or misunderstood entirely, like the Great Pyramid, are able to be seen as much more sophisticated technology than they can be given credit by this Darwinian straight line form of evolution.
Yeah, how is that possible?
So, if people could have had more sophisticated understanding of their world in the past, then building the Great Pyramid makes sense. But if they were just recently out of the Stone Age, then the Great Pyramid has to be a tomb for one single egomaniacal pharaoh, right? So if we dial that cycle forward and look at today, look at 2024, we're in a period of time where we are ascending in consciousness. The Yugas are divided into two arcs, the descending arc from about 11,500 BC to 500 AD, and then from 500 AD forward, eventually reaching that same peak in 12,500 AD. But now we're relatively in the beginning arc, upward arc. And one of the things that characterizes the upward arc is that we're reinventing the past. We're taking what we knew from the past and we are taking what we want and throwing away the rest. And we don't always do that in a measured, even pattern. So it is a long cycle. We're talking thousands of years. So in 1 year, we may not see like a clear gradation of improvement. We might see a lot of things breaking. Yeah. And we see this tension politically today in conservative versus progressive. So conservatives tend to want to hang on to the way things were, and progressives tend to embrace the fact that there's this galloping change, and it creates this political tension, but it also creates a cultural and societal tension that is been playing out for the last 150 years, really, if we could look back. It tends to be a little more intense, according to the theory of the Yugas. It tends to be a little more intense as this current age we're in progresses, because we're essentially learning how to exploit energy, and we're learning how to apply that by exploiting it to the development of society. And it's made for a fast-paced, intense society. So whatever breakages and progressions we make, they tend to have a little more juice to them than they did 100 years ago or 200 years ago.
When you say exploiting energy, are you talking about like over unity and free energy type of concepts? Like we're learning how to, utilize that finally, and we're at a stage, or what do you mean?
Well, at the most basic level, we learned how to exploit energy by heating water until it became steam, and then using the steam to, move pistons. And we gradually recognized that there were subtler and subtler ways to use energy. We discovered electricity, we discovered nuclear energy, and we've discovered solar energy. So we're just continuing to extract energy and put it to particular uses that we want there to be. Simultaneously, though, and I think that's what's going to save us in this age we're in, is that we've discovered subtle energy. Mm-hmm. So subtle energy is inner energy. I imagine you both have done this or been in a workshop where you're asked to do this, where you rub your hands together.
Yeah.
And then you close your eyes and you pull your hands apart, and you can feel something in between your hands. Yeah. It's like there's a kind of a spongy reality between your hands. I can't prove this, but I believe in the prior lower age, if you'd ask somebody to do that, they wouldn't have felt anything. That the theme of the cycles is that mankind as a whole progresses through subtler and subtler levels of awareness.
Mhm.
And that the cycle we're in now, the age within the cycle we're in now, is the discovery of inner energy. And that the next age will be the discovery of thought and how to control thought. And then the final age is the discovery of consciousness itself and how to use that consciousness to become one with spirit. So, but for now, mankind as a whole is first discovering energy outwardly and exploiting it, but now discovering energy and how to use it inwardly. So meditation, yoga postures, Tai Chi, many of the practices that have just spread across the world all have to do with that ability to feel inner energy and then learn to direct it to our own benefit and expansion. Interestingly enough, all of those that I just mentioned were practiced 3,000 years ago.
Yeah.
And then they died out in the lower ages when people's consciousness was just raw materiality. And now that we're getting back into the more subtle energy consciousness, we rediscover them and put them to new use. So that's part of the cycle, is recognizing that we're doing things that had already been done thousands of years ago.
Do you think we are just, is that because we're now more comfortable? We've got running water, we've got, food, we're not hunting for our food. Why do you think we were more attracted to the physical, matter realm, years ago?
Well, I think even if we were hunting our own food still, that we would still have a natural hunger for greater fulfillment. And that we would seek it in all kinds of ways, like owning the most mastodons or, having the best garden or whatever. And you can translate that to whatever you want in our modern age. People try to possess a lot of stuff or have a lot of stuff. But there is a segment of society, a segment of people, which is now probably in the hundreds of millions, who don't think their ultimate satisfaction is going to come that way.
Yeah.
And they seek subtler ways of becoming peaceful and calm and loving and happy. And that's when they draw, as we've talked about already, the magnetism draws to them these kind of practices.
Yeah. And I think the everyday life shows you these cycles. So just the cycle of the sun every day, right? Coming up and coming down. So I think it does a fractal replication of, like you said, the 24 100-year cycles. You start to see that in order for the human mind to kind of conceive this, we're already living these fractal lives, but we can't see beyond it. But yet, like, most people like the sunlight because it produces serotonin. It feels good. And when the night comes, we go to sleep. We don't deny the night, but we actually, when you understand the cycle and it's like 9, 10 o'clock at night and you start to get tired, you accept that. So I think that's kind of how it happens, no matter what we're doing, if we're in that cycle. So as these bigger cycles, becoming aware of them, because we're becoming more aware, we can start to see and maybe let go of like trying to slow down or stop from an individual or collective society. We know, okay, let's move in this direction. And I think part of like the work you're doing is helping people to relax a little bit more and know that this is going to be pushing you in a direction which is going to be more beneficial to you than not.
Right.
Like, yeah, and that's the brilliance about the books you put out there. It's helping people to relax a little bit more that otherwise might they need the fulfillment or another valid way of looking at it. And this
Or
is
especially what I try to do is just not have science be an obstacle
yeah,
to embracing subtler truths, because science is not in conflict with
no,
subtle reality whatsoever. it's scientists who embrace reality
Yeah.
that are the obstacle, not science itself, and that there's tons of support for subtle experience in the discoveries that exist even today.
Speaking on that, and I just want to see if you can, I don't know how briefly you can touch on this, but one thing I do want you to kind of go over with the audience, and you touched on it earlier, but end theory, and just kind of the idea of this holographic experience. Can you give a little synopsis of end theory for the audience?
Well, let me start by briefly mentioning what it is that M theory parallels.
Okay.
So what it parallels is the spiritual teaching that we have astral bodies, that we have a subtle body, and that subtle body is actually creating the physical body. That the real power that is behind holding all the atoms and molecules in form that make up our physical body is actually outside the physical continuum. And it is warp and woof with our physical body, but it is distinct from it and it vibrates at a higher frequency. So this notion is pretty much common to all experiential spiritual traditions, you know, from yoga to Zen to Tai Chi and on and on. So up until M theory, which is a type of string theory, it's the most accepted type of string theory. Up until that emerged, there really was not any strong support for the possibility of that astral body existing in terms of what physicists had discovered. But M theory, working from the basic premise of string theory, began to work out mathematically and drew on other mathematical systems within other branches of physics. And they began to be able to prove mathematically, if not by experimentation, that there's a vast amount of energy that exists at a higher frequency and outside the physical universe. And that it has to exist to explain how the physical universe could exist. So not only did they posit that there was this infinite ocean of high frequency energy outside the physical universe, they also realized that the best explanation for how the physical universe is created is the holographic analogy. And that the hologram, in terrestrial terms, the hologram is the film, and the holographic projection is what we see when laser light, coherent light, is shown through that film. And then we see from two-dimensional film, we get a three-dimensional image. And the finer the degree of resolution of the film, the finer degree of resolution of the holographic projection. So there are holographic projections done that will fool you at a distance into thinking they actually are a real person or a real object that have been created today. One problem with them, of course, is if you go up to them, you can stick your arm through them. But from a distance, they're very convincing.
Absolutely.
So what this increasing refinement of that science of holography led to was a lot of mathematics that governed how the holographic system works. And they being M theorists, found that they could take that mathematics and they could, to some degree, they could roll it in to the math of M theory. And it made them come to the conclusion that the hologram, the information, the two-dimensional flat film, if you will, that is the entire universe, exists in this two-dimensional energy realm. And that when that energy is shone through that film, so to speak, it holographically projects the entire physical universe. And it was M theorists, not kooky conspiracy theorists, who are convinced that we live in a video game. It was M theorists who actually first came up with the, strong conviction that our universe is a holographic projection.
Mhm.
So if we quickly, and I'm going to jump over a lot of steps here, we quickly compare that to our physical body. Our physical body is a holographic projection from the two-dimensional film that is our astral body, our hologram body. And that is the scientific mechanism, if you will, scientific support for what has been a spiritual teaching for millennia.
Wow.
Yeah, and because actually with technology now, we can actually somewhat wrap our mind around it because there are holographic. Because 100 years ago, you didn't have that technology to even conceive that.
Now we see it in present day media. I mean,
Yeah, but
you know,
we are the hologram too, so it's just a fractal of it. It's pretty much. I think that's how things work, and like technology is here to show us who we already are. But if you get too lost in technology, you can lose that connection as well. So
can you go a little bit deeper on how it's our astral body projecting our physical body? So essentially, we're projecting ourselves from a 2D standpoint, is what you're saying with them theory?
it's like a film.
Well, we are that
Yeah.
2D body.
Yeah.
So I think a way to put it in perspective is that when we die, we are immediately and automatically aware of ourselves as light beings.
Mhm.
And light is two-dimensional. And that higher expression of ourself, our more refined expression of ourself, is more truly who we are. Our physical body is the least true, if you will, of who and what we really are. And so I mentioned the resolution. The resolution of our astral body is extremely refined, whereas our physical body, even though it's, seems like a very high resolution, is actually formed of energy that is vibrating at a much lower frequency than what exists in the astral or the pure energy realm of M theory. So we're continuously projecting ourselves from a position outside of the physical universe. And yet there's no separation between those two realities. We are both simultaneously. We don't recognize in our day-to-day awareness that there is a separate reality or get glimpses of it until we start to meditate and we start to be able to experience that pure energy reality of ourself when the physical reality becomes quiet and stops being our primary focus. Then what we're immediately aware of is the subtle reality, which is wonderful, calming, loving, all the things that we like. It's not perfectly all those things because that's really the perfection of our soul, but we're able to express it more through our astral body, through our light body than we are through our physical and in the environment. The environment we're in doesn't encourage that higher level of experience of emotion and perception.
Yeah.
So our astral body is just really nice. It's why when you read near-death experiencers, when they have that experience, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
There was one woman who said, you can, how did she put it? You can live the best possible life you could ever possibly live, and it would never be better than death. I love that quote. That it's just so overwhelmingly wonderful to the near-death experiences who make it into the heavens. They make it into the realms where their astral body exists, because it's just closer to spirit.
Yeah. It's kind of like how we on Halloween say put a costume on and we portray ourselves as something different than we are. But there's nothing greater than at the end of the night taking that costume off. And that's kind of, now you go back to your naked body and nothing pulling on it. So it's kind of another fractal of how that is. Like we can understand that once you take that costume off, everything that you had to portray with it goes with it. And there's this sense of like, relaxation.
Yes. And you have a release and a relief, because not only have you been wearing this clunky costume, you've been trying to find all your satisfaction and happiness from the costume. And when you go into the heavens, you realize, oh, everything I wanted had nothing to do with the costume. That was never me. It was never going to give me the kind of satisfaction that I'm now experiencing. And that's utterly relief. A lot of near-death experiencers come back and they say they never look at this world the same way again.
Yeah, it'd be different.
They realize they're here to serve, they're here to love, they're here to give, but they're not here to find satisfaction. That the satisfaction is already theirs. It's already within them.
I forgot the name of the individual, but I listened to it. An Apollo astronaut share a very similar. He didn't have a near-death experience, but how he.
This is probably Edgar Mitchell, right?
It might have been Mitchell, but I don't want to say it if it's not I can't remember exactly. But he was talking very similar to a near-death experience, exactly same verbiage, etc. It was this moment where I will now like never, or he was up and he was looking down at this blue little quarter, or however he phrased it. And he like, it was in that moment, in all this space that it clicked for me. I have never had such an expansive view of my being, and I realized I was not this body, and I thought that was really powerful because it wasn't through a near-death experience. It was through a totally different experience that not very many of us have experienced before, which is being on the realm of, outside of the space barrier or whatever it is.
Right. And feeling yourself one. That was the biggest part of his description, is that he felt that he was a part of all that, not in an abstract intellectual way, but he felt that he was a part of all that. And he went on to start the Institute of Noetic Sciences.
We're talking about the same person. Yep.
Yeah. So Edgar Mitchell funded the Institute of Noetic Sciences, whose sole purpose is to try to, experimentally fathom how he could have had such a profound experience that was non-physical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well said.
And that's why at 19 you took mushrooms or whatever he took.
Right. So, quick question for you then. I know that I've heard this from you specifically in an interview I watched. So it sounds like M theory, the M, what it stands for is opinion between multiple different people about what it means. What do you think M stands for, and how do you define the M in M theory?
I don't think it needs to have a meaning. I think the original guy who called it M theory thought it was going to be magical, but I could say it's mystical because it seems to apply to what most people think of as a mystical reality. But I don't really know. And I think people called it what they wanted because it suggested it to them as they were understanding it.
Yeah, and spoke to them.
And that's a pretty recent finding, right? Was it 1995 or something like that?
Yeah, it's the frontier of physics at the moment. There are other disciplines that are being pursued that for the same kind of reason, but they're taking a very different approach. The same reason is that physicists are wrestling with trying to reconcile Einstein's theory of relativity with quantum physics, and they just can't get them to merge mathematically. If you apply the math of quantum physics to gravity, you get impossible answers. If you apply the mathematics of relativity theory to quantum physics, you get impossible answers. And generally speaking, it's the really vast and large compared to the infinitesimally tiny that is quantum physics realm. So the other disciplines out there are trying to quantize gravity so that you can talk about gravity mathematically as a quantum system. And so far they're not doing it. So far
Gravity
they're
control. Are you familiar with what's his name, Frank? It's Nassim Haramein, or yeah, right.
Haramein, yeah.
Are you familiar?
Yes, I do know of him.
Yeah. Yeah, we were just watching something on him the other day. Frank and I Frank shared it to me, and it was great. He was talking about how, the last 10 years he's been working on how to quantify gravity control, because that, once we can do that, then we can step into this space-time, Einstein connecting it to the quantum world.
Right.
Yeah.
So M theory is one solution to that, which I tend to think is, if not the total solution, is a good solution, because I think it matches the spiritual reality that is experientially discovered rather than experimentally discovered by saints, sages, near-death experiencers for thousands of years. So it's that congruence with spiritual teachings that makes me think it's likely to be proven true in the fullness of time.
Yeah, it seems like we're definitely heading that way. You're starting to see less separation between the two, where there was a period of time where they were completely separated.
Right.
And I guess, it's easy to say this is the best time to be living because I'm living. But it's kind of interesting. It's like watching a great movie and you're on the precipice of something's about to happen. Like when the movie first starts out, it might be somewhat mundane in what we call mundane, but then there's a heightened tension that something's about to happen and you can tell that it's going to be good, but right now we're going through something. And it seems like that is part and parcel of this experience that I think everyone's having. Some people are looking at it in a more terrified way. Some people are looking at it in a very exciting way, kind of like someone on a roller coaster. If you're on a roller coaster, you love roller coasters, the most exciting place in the world. If you don't, it's terrifying, even though you're going through the same experience.
Yeah. Well, we're in a time where we have the increasing pace of change.
Yeah.
And if you like exactly what you have and you don't want it to change, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
But if you like to see things changing for what you perceive to be the better, it's a wonderful time.
Yeah. And maybe for some people that don't like their life, it's exciting for them because this is about to change.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
But yeah.
So here we are in the beginning of January 2024. Joseph, what do you have planned for this year? What are some goals, or where are you? What's next for you?
I have been working for the last couple of years on a new book called Physics and what is it called? Physics and Miraculous Healing.
Oh,
Okay.
nice.
All right.
So the goal of the book is to kind of make the same case for the possibility of miraculous healing as my other books are making the case for the possibility of higher consciousness. So there are many, many well-documented cases of extraordinarily rapid physical healing And some of those cases seem to be just an individual having that experience. Many of the cases appear to be a divine intervention. But either way, according to modern medicine and biochemistry and molecular biology, it's impossible. That physical change cannot happen that quickly. And so they tend to just push it aside and just say, if we looked at it, if we bothered to go look at these cases, we would discover that they were sloppily documented, that people lied, or that it was outright fraud. And so we're just not even going to bother to go look at them.
Yeah.
Because we know they're impossible. And so what I'm trying to do with this book, and I'm sure I'm not the first, is to show that just like the higher realms of physics, frontiers of physics, supports consciousness and a much bigger picture of reality, equally, it supports this possibility of extraordinarily rapid change, pretty much for the same reason that I was already explaining to you about the hologram, which is not only is the hologram astral body creating the physical body, any change in the astral body is reflected instantly in the physical body.
Yeah.
So if you have a massive change for some reason in the astral body, you'll have a massive change in the physical body.
Yeah.
So a lot of the book is walking people through sort of the increasing levels of subtlety of their own physical body and finally reaching that connection to a hologram subtle energy body. And then the rest of the book is exploring how we as individuals can take advantage of that, how we can harmonize our emotions, sort of upgrade our beliefs, connect to spirit to increase our health and even overcome what are considered to be terminal illnesses and incurable diseases by, bypassing the beliefs and mechanisms that are offered by, modern medicine and embracing these higher levels of science and higher levels of spiritual teachings to be healthy, not relying on pills and surgery.
Yeah. And that's becoming evident because it seems like a lot of people are on pills. I went to the doctor to just get blood work and, I'm 56. And when I tell them I'm not on any medication, they were shocked.
How did you do that? How
Yeah.
did you make it to that age without being on
and again, I'm not saying it's anything I do per se. Maybe I'm just lucky, but once you start understanding principles on how to take care of yourself, people like worried about the healthcare system. Like this is how we help or procure a new healthcare system is by going within. And so I think more and more people are actually utilizing this with the old, like, because I only have a clients, I'll tell them like, well, I'm not telling you not to go to the doctor, but do breathing exercises, do meditation along with, don't stop what the doctor tells you. And in some cases, their disease becomes augmented or less than, or they need less medication. So there's a major they see a correlation. And so it's not about jumping off the building. I'm like, just walk down the stairs one step at a time. And when you get to the bottom, you realize, oh my God, I was in control the whole time. We were just utilizing pills as a permission slip, so to speak. I no longer need that. And in this interim period, like obviously people like you coming out with these books are dire because more and more people, the more books about this out there, the more people will tend to believe it and realize it. People that are experiencing, like the person who went in, had cancer and the cancer is gone, knows. The doctor might call it a miracle, but they know. And they might discard it, whatever, but maybe the person doesn't know exactly how it happened. But when there's scientists out there like you explaining this, that it's possible, it's going to set a whole new set of people looking at health completely different. And this is how we'll take care of our healthcare system. We'll start
Yeah,
generating.
well, that's the hope. I hope I can contribute to that. Obviously, alternative healing, got rolling a long time ago, but I think for many people, again, what they think science is telling them is an obstacle.
Yeah.
They're unwilling to embrace the possibility because they think it can't possibly be valid medicine.
Yeah. That's why
Where what I think what you can see from all the examples and from science is that it's much more powerful than pills and surgery, that you are your most transformative instrument. And if you can learn how to get a grip on your emotions, beliefs, and connect to spirit, you can have huge effect, positive effect on your health.
Yeah. And I think that's why people that have these dire prognosis, like they're going to die in 6 months, and not that it obviously doesn't happen all the time, but they do have these profound understandings because they're almost at a place where, like, why not believe can happen to me?
Right.
What do I have to lose? And it seems to jar something. But if someone's somewhat relatively healthy and maybe have a little bit going on, they might not want to take the chance of buying into that, and they go along with the medical field, which may make them worse. We don't know, but there's something there about people that are close to death and like, the hell with it. Let me, my back's against the wall. I got nothing to lose, and you start to see things happen there. It's pretty wild. But we don't. What you're getting at is teaching us is we don't have to get to the place where our back is against the wall. We can integrate it slowly. If you take one step at a time each day, eventually the valley becomes grander and bigger and more. You could see the whole city after a while, but just by one step at a time. And then eventually you get to the top, like, oh, this is what it looks like. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
This is what it looks like.
Yeah. Some people get there quickly. Some people need to take the steps one step at a time. Either way, it's a journey, Yeah.
Something like that is powerful.
Yeah.
You're doing great work, Joseph. And honestly, we've been honored to have you on, this episode on our Perspective Shift podcast. Our audience, we're all about, showing these different multiple perspectives that we can all share. There's not just one side of the coin like we've been taught. We've been fed so many ideas that this is the way life is. This is the way science is. And that's just not the case.
Yeah.
Plain and simple, factually speaking, that's just not the case. And so when we can offer these different perspectives, it just kind of broadens everyone's horizon and gives them material to dive into. Also to learn more about, truly how powerful we are, the creators we are, what our role, coming here to remember, what we are, how we experience this world.
Yeah, no, I want to compliment you both for doing this. It's a good work, and not only getting more books out there, getting more videos out there is going to really change consciousness on a big scale.
Absolutely. So we all know, or our audience knows, they can get your books, on Amazon or off of your website, I'm sure. Is there a website, or is there some information you'd like to share, how those listening, if they wanted to reach out, contact you, or just support what you're doing, how can they get in touch with you, Joseph?
JosephSelbie.com is my website. And let me just make sure you understand the spelling of Selbie. It's not the normal way. You probably have seen it. It's Selbie rather than Selby. So it's Joseph Selbie, Selbie.com. You can find articles. You can find links to other interviews. You can find out more about all my books. And there is contact information there as well.
Yeah, perfect. And we'll put that at the bottom in a link. So
Great.
so they'll be able to just hit on it and go right to you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, honestly, Joseph, this conversation was extremely eye-opening for both Frank and I, and it was such a pleasure having you on the show today.
Glad to have been here.
All right. In light speed. Yeah.
I was going to say, we'll have you back on. We'll reach out again, and good luck. Real quick, can we expect your new book this year in 24, or is this going to bleed into?
It's going to come out in September.
Nice.
Oh,
Okay, so
nice. All
September
right.
of this year.
All right.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So I'd love to come back on and talk to you guys about it.
Exactly.
Definitely. We'd
That'll
love
be
to
a
have you on.
perfect segue.
Because this is the books that people need at this moment in time.
Yeah.
So, all right. Thank you for your great work.
Thanks so much, Joseph.
My pleasure.
We'll talk with you soon.
All right. Be well.
All right.
Bye.
Perspective Shift is brought to you by fdailycoaching.com. If you're seeking assistance to help navigate you through a difficult time or feel challenged to reach your full potential, Frank Daly can guide you to a perspective that will allow you to utilize your imagination and experience a more fulfilling and satisfying life. Frank has been working with people for over 20 years as a coach, helping them understand the power they have to transform their lives.